So the observation was that unlike any other form of energy storage, hydrogen is both a battery, meaning it stores it very efficiently over endless amounts of time, and it's also a fuel. And when you use it as a fuel through a fuel cell, you produce 100% green energy because you get byproduct is water, H2O. So if you get clean hydrogen to start with, if you start with green hydrogen, you end up with a green system. And then you start to turn the dial back really fast on fossil fuels because fossil fuels are nowhere near as economic as hydrogen. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you have to find where it's going to be cheapest to be made and get it to the places where it's most in demand.
Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides. I'm Gareth Evans.
And I'm Dan Roberts. We're the founding team of VECKTA, a platform and marketplace streamlining how companies buy on-site energy.
In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition through the experiences of our team and our inspiring guests.
Our goal is to help companies take action to create a resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future.
Let's go. Today, we are joined by Rinaldo Brutoco. He is an entrepreneur, futurist, attorney, climate leader, and the unstoppable force behind H2 Clipper, a company reimagining global transportation with hydrogen-powered airships. How cool is that? From winning the largest class action lawsuit in the US history by the age of 25, to founding the World Business Academy and advising on climate tech adoption worldwide, Rinaldo has spent a lifetime proving that businesses can be the most powerful force for good. This is a conversation about moonshots, mindset shifts, and how to lead with both purpose and profit in a world that needs both more than ever. So let's get into it. Rinaldo, welcome to the show. As always, we like to start with getting to know you a bit. So tell us, what are you passionate about?
Thank you for having me. I'm very passionate about reversing climate change, not slowing it down, reversing it. I think it's a matter of life or death for human civilization, and we have far less time than people know.
Yeah,
that's what keeps me coming to work every day.
Super awesome. Love it. And where does that passion come from?
Well, I've always been a how can I help kind of guy for as far back as I can remember. But it became really clear to me early in my career that the size of challenges our society was facing were so large that they were not capable of being resolved by normal political processes, nor by normal academic processes, nor by religious institutions. And then it became obvious that meant that business had to get involved because we're the only international organization that basically can cause almost everything to happen, and by accident often do, and by intention often do. So then the question became, how do we get the business community to focus on this, to see it as something that's going to destroy their markets and their businesses, not just their children and their grandchildren? And it's been a very, very tough dialogue to have, and only beginning to get some success lately. It's been a long time coming.
Certainly, Rinaldo. There's a lot to unpack there, and let's jump into that in a second. Take us back a little bit. Where'd you grow up? Go to school? What have you done up in?
Well, don't tell Trump, but I'm an immigrant. So now they know where I am. I was born in Toronto, Canada, which barely qualifies as an immigrant. I was so fortunate because I came with language and skills that, of course, I was only 5 or 6 when I first got here with my parents. It's been an extraordinarily interesting run. And where I come from, raised mostly in Southern California. When I got out of law school, I went north for school, undergraduate, then I went back north after law school. I wanted to start my business up there in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, back in the 70s when it was really quite exciting. And there were a whole lot of us out doing it. And I did that for quite some time until about 25 years ago, when I looked around and said, okay, I can live anywhere in the world I want. Where do I want to live? And Santa Barbara came up real high on that list, and I ended up here.
I share that with you. I tell a lot of people, having spent nearly 8 years in Santa Barbara. There's arguably not a better place out there.
It's amazing. I love it. And, it's, as I said, I was blessed to be able to build businesses that could afford to have me run them from anywhere long before it was, COVID. So I learned how to do that. And I said, okay, Santa Barbara is where I want to go. Okay.
That's brilliant. So Rinaldo, what sparked your conviction that businesses could and must be a force for good, particularly on this sort of climate reversal topic?
It was inevitable, just, the power of observation. So I started the World Business Academy in 1986. And my partner who joined me, the first guy to join, was a guy named Willis Harmon. And Willis was a very interesting character. If you don't know, look him up. One of the brightest people in the world. He was the father of artificial intelligence. He actually was the guy who invented it and taught it at Stanford Electrical Engineering Department.
Wow.
Stanford Research grabbed him out of there, put him in as chief futurist in residence for 16 years, and he quit that to join me at the academy. And he was an exceptionally, what's the word? Besides being bright, he was an exceptionally thoughtful and careful observer of human relations. And he asked me one night after dinner, what did I think needed to happen if we were going to turn the mess around? This was in 1985. So the mess was not as obvious as it is now, but pretty obvious if you're like me, you're looking at the future. And I said, well, 3 things have to happen, Willis. Number one, we've got to shift the consciousness of existing business leadership from that of a predator to that of a steward. Because if you do that, then you're responsible for what you do. Stewards are responsible, predators aren't. So the second thing we have to do is shift the consciousness of young people going into business, particularly business schools. So they see themselves entering a noble profession, not a jungle. All the metaphors when I came into business were jungle and military metaphors, because you don't give yourself permission to do things in the temple that you give yourself permission to do in the jungle. The third thing is we have to shift the consciousness of the public at large so it puts its money in terms of purchasing power where its deeper values are, and then business will turn on a dime. So that was the original tripartite mission of the Academy. The business community is trained to change or die, even when we don't talk about it. And so we're predisposed to keep finding new solutions in the face of new problems being manifest, new opportunities being presented. When I was in law school, I brought and was eventually successful, winning the largest case in the history of the United States at the California Supreme Court level. It was a huge class action, $130 million against the largest AT&T subsidiary, which was Bell Phone. And when that case was over, and I knew I'd won it, and I knew I won it big, and I demanded cash refunds to everybody in California. I wanted them to know they were had, and they were getting money back. And when I finished that case, I swore to myself I'd never want to litigate again. Because while I was doing that case, Bell had 2 more platoons of lawyers behind me doing 2 more cases. And it became abundantly clear to me I would never be able to change society by throwing sand in the other guy's gears. The way to change society, I decided, was to build my own gears, build my own box. So I decided, although I was the guy with the huge beard, wide tie, anti-war office in the 60s at UCLA and Berkeley, I go, wait a minute, I got to go into business. So for me, going in and having business address these issues has been a key driver, both in my for-profit side and in my nonprofit side. In my nonprofit side, through the World Business Academy and other nonprofits I've started over the years, but in my for-profit side, just waiting until things came along that needed to get done that no one else was doing, and then I do them, and lo and behold, I get money from it. Or I don't. Sometimes I don't. I don't distinguish based on economic, which also makes it very unusual for the business world.
Yeah.
I don't evaluate opportunities by prospective economic advantage.
I saw a great presentation by someone who works now for Ray C. Anderson's company before he passed away. And I did some research on him afterwards. And he said, in the future, people like me will go to jail for plundering the planet. And I thought it was very interesting. Apparently, he literally switched overnight of being super all about profits to then all about.
Yeah, a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Ray was a good friend of mine, member of the Academy till the day he died. And, he had many observations. And one of them I often share with younger business people is He said, if you want to try climbing Mount Sustainability, that's what he called it, right? Because remember, he was the carpet guy. If you want to try climbing Mount Sustainability, you don't stop, don't ever fail to stop and look back down the mountain. If all you look at is where you're headed, you won't get there. But if you go and look back at how far you've come, it'll give you the juice to get there. That was his big observation. And by the way, Ray's a classic example. I'm glad you brought him up. So here's a guy who became disgusted with how much landfill was being consumed by rugs. And that gave him the perception, gee, wait a minute, rugs only wear out in the middle. Why don't we make a different kind of rug? So he came up with carpet tiles. Obviously made more money at carpet tiles than he ever did making rugs before that. So another example, it's not guaranteed you'll get more money if you do the right thing, but actually, you feel good and you make good money on the side. It's a good thing.
So where do you think we're sitting here? We're 2025, an interesting point in time as it relates to the climate reversing. Can you share some of your thoughts on kind of maybe one at a macro scale, but then what are you seeing, whether it's through your direct work, whether it's through the work that those in your network are doing, where rather than being zoomed out, you zoom in and look at a particular example of someone that is really shifting the dynamic inside their business in the right direction?
Well, I think, people shift the dynamic in their business in different ways. Let me give you an example. I think Salesforce.com has done a good job of shifting the dimension in Silicon Valley to a somewhat more humanistic, less VC, drive people into the ground to get rich quick because we got a 5-year portfolio and we've got to cash it out. And I think Salesforce.com has done a good job. Mark Benioff, as you know, the CEO, has done a good job of taking some of that pressure off in his organization. And I believe that's one of the reasons his organization is so creatively adapted now to 3 major changes since he got into the business. Now, you could go to other people who are known for having made enormous contributions with what they do. My partner for many years, until just recently when he retired, was Paul Tudor Jones. Paul was the founder of Tudor Capital. He started out with nothing, like me, but he went into commodities, and he was a cotton trader and made billions of dollars in commodities. And then he started 29 years ago the Robin Hood Foundation in New York City. And he has raised $100 million a night, every night for the last 29 years. One night a year, $100 million, 29 years in a row. And that money is required to be spent in the 5 boroughs of New York. So he's funded endless numbers of programs for early education, for disadvantaged youth, food pantries. I mean, all manner of nonprofit activities. Now, that was his way of addressing what business could do. And he's had a huge impact. I think the other one I would use is Ray Chambers. So I've known Ray for a very long time. Ray was an extraordinarily successful self-made billionaire on Wall Street and dedicated at least 7 years that I know of to becoming the Undersecretary of the United Nations for free, for $1 a year, used his own airplane to fly around the world in, didn't even bill him for it. And he is the guy who single-handedly brought basically mosquito-borne disease under control. So Gates paid for all the nets and Ray got them installed. And Ray was this massive force at the UN as a business guy because he knew how to go get it done. Now it's going backwards now, as you know, because under the current political regime, they pulled the money back, they pulled the mosquito nets back, and we're now seeing a resurgence, particularly in Africa. And by the way, it's coming here too. West Nile virus is now growing in the U.S. We've had other issues that are now arising in America. But Ray did this phenomenal job, and he did it as a business guy. He said, hey, I can do this because I understand how to make things happen on a large scale interaction. I'll end with this observation. Business is really, really good at getting stuff done. In fact, I would put it in a more philosophical way. Business is really good at taking something from the etheric plane of reality, so the world of ideas, of consciousness, of awareness, and translating it into material reality. So my favorite example of that is Henry Ford. Before you build an assembly line, you got to envision one.
Yep.
For me, business is the ideal set of tools that you can develop so that you can make a difference in your world. And if you assume, as I do, remember, I'm an immigrant, so I didn't have any silver spoons. If you assume that you can make a living, not necessarily be a Rockefeller, not necessarily be a pauper, but you can make a good living, whatever you do, go do something worthwhile.
Yeah.
You're not here that long. I mean, we are a blip on the universal radar screen. We are really here for a short time.
So on that note, what is it that you're working on? I see H2 Clipper. Can you tell us about what inspired that and what your mission is?
So one of the things I'm working on is the H2 Clipper. We call H2 Clipper Inc. the hydrogen transportation company. So I wrote a book that came out actually out of the meeting that Ray Anderson spoke at in 2005, a 3-day meeting in Santa Barbara. I was appalled by how little everybody there knew about renewable energy. I mean, I thought like they'd be reading up on it. Nothing. I mean, zero, zilch. So I wrote a book in 2007 with 2 of my buddies. It is still very relevant. It's a compendium of all things, all renewable energies looked at. Ones that were not practical, we looked at and said why they weren't practical. Ones that were practical, ones that were happening, ones that hadn't happened yet. And when we got through doing this research, it was clear to us that the only way to replace fossil fuels, which we were committed we had to do, would be with hydrogen. There's no other way to do it. So then we started looking at, well, what's the bottleneck? What keeps hydrogen from happening? So first I started writing articles about it in the academy, hoping someone would want to steal my stuff and go do it, which is always my default is always tell people how to do it and what they should do, and then you don't have to if somebody does it for you. And if not, then I got to go put my business hat on and do it. So the observation was that unlike any other form of energy storage, hydrogen is both a battery, meaning it stores it very efficiently over endless amounts of time, and it's also a fuel. And when you use it as a fuel through a fuel cell, you produce 100% green energy because you get byproduct is water, H2O. So if you get clean hydrogen to start with, if you start with green hydrogen, you end up with a green system. And then you start to turn the dial back really fast on fossil fuels because fossil fuels are nowhere near as economic as hydrogen. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you have to find where it's going to be cheapest to be made and get it to the places where it's most in demand. So the example I always like to use is, well, when I started, it was about 68% of the cost of a kilogram of hydrogen was the electricity input. Today, it's 73%, meaning the price of electrolyzers has come down. Mm-hmm. So now the role of electricity in making hydrogen is even more dominant. Yep. So if you're talking about a 73% cost factor for one ingredient, you got to say to yourself, okay, where can I get that ingredient the cheapest possible way that's green? And of course, it turns out those are not necessarily places like Berlin or Rome or Paris. Right? They're like Nova Scotia. They're like Wales, and they're like Scotland, and they're like Morocco. I mean, you get the point, right? So how do you get from where it's really super cheap to make, and I'm going to give you a number in a second, to where the people want to use it? So here's a number you can quote with great confidence. Everybody knows that about 97% of the world's hydrogen today is made from what's called methane reformation. So that's cracking methane down and being used primarily in refineries as a way to further crack a barrel of oil into products. It's a very small business altogether. Maybe at this point, 60 billion globally in a year. I mean, nothing major, right? So that distinction of how to get it cheap, turns out you can do it for $0.015 a kilogram. The Saudis say they can do it for 1.2 cents per kilogram. Moroccans can do it for $0.015 for sure. Other places that only have solar but don't have wind also, which would be Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara, we estimate that because you'd have to have solar to do it, you're probably going to spend close to 4 cents. Wind is 4 to 5 cents. Geothermal is unbelievably cheap. And by the way, if you haven't got your antenna out, start listening for geothermal. It's about to break through as a major technology because we've had it forever. We just didn't know that we could use water further from the surface and it would still have enough heat to make electricity economically. But anyway, putting that aside, when you see these factors kick in, so you go, okay, the reality is that for every time I want to make a kilogram of hydrogen, it's going to cost me $0.015 electricity. And I, Rinaldo, am paying $36 a kilogram at the pump in Santa Barbara for my car. Something in the middle there is broken. Right?
Yeah.
What is that? It's broken. Well, what's broken is the transportation. It turned out that the Germans have now signed a major contract with Canada to export 100% of the output of the plant in Nova Scotia that's going to be using 100% green energy to make hydrogen, and there's no way to get it to Germany except the Clipper. Okay, so what the Clipper was I had to invent something that was economic enough, and that meant big enough, that it could carry enough liquid hydrogen virtually any distance so cheaply that it would not appreciably add to the cost of the hydrogen itself.
Nice.
So that's what pushed me into the world of Clipper. And there's a very funny story that comes out of Hawaii, but why I got started with dirigibles. But basically, in response to a question that that was the chief renewable energy advisor of the state of Hawaii for about 3 years as a nonprofit thing, and the head of the Calvin Say, the Speaker of the House for 17 years, said to me, Rinaldo, if there really is as much power as you say in the Puna geothermal facility, why couldn't we power the whole state of Hawaii with that? I said, well, Speaker, you could. The trouble is you got to get it from there to here. It's about 250 miles away. And he said, well, how would you do that? I go, it's lighter than air. You probably float it in a dirigible. He looked at me and said, does such a ship exist? I go, no, but there's no inherent reason why it wouldn't. It could. I made the mistake of telling a good friend. He asked me to draw it on the back of a piece of paper. And before I know it, I had like 250 patents for all kinds of stuff. Because the Clipper is this revolutionary technology. It's a ship that's 1,000 feet long, carries up to 400,000 pounds of liquid hydrogen anywhere in the world, is 100% green. It only uses hydrogen to a fuel cell to an electric motor to a propeller. And it can land anywhere in basically its own length. Doesn't need a harbor, doesn't need an airport. Can pick it up. You can pick it up off your roof. You can take it anywhere you want. That technology was so fascinating to me. It caused me then to look at all the subsystems that go into that technology. How do you get it from liquid into gas? How do you get gas into my car? So we dedicated the company to the movement of hydrogen, all forms. And I'm glad we did, because it became clear to me early on, the oil companies will want to still control hydrogen. They'll just figure it out how. And governments. And lots of people are going to get into business distribution. There's no shortage of people that will do that. What they need is an economic way to get it from point A to point B. And if I can solve that, then I've sliced the Gordian knot, and now you have a hydrogen economy, which is what's coming.
Super interesting. Gareth and I were in Germany at a Hannover Messe, one of the big industrial conferences 2 years ago. And we left feeling like the general chatter was around hydrogen, but that the real challenge was moving it around. So it's interesting that's what you've keyed in on and solved. So tell us some of the applications here. I mean, is this for industrial applications? You mentioned your car in Santa Barbara, but I know that a lot of the fueling stations have pulled back. Yeah, where are you taking this hydrogen to?
First of all, certain things require liquid hydrogen because they need that kind of heat in that kind of location, and others require gaseous hydrogen. So there's the beauty of hydrogen is it quickly changes from either. If you want to do what are called hard-to-abate sectors, that would be steel and cement, you really want liquid hydrogen because you want to get that temperature up so high. There's no coke involved. There's no melting of metal or coal. All that stuff goes away. And what you're doing is you're just blasting with an extremely high heat directly at whatever it is you're trying to convert, steel or cement. So those two are going to go hydrogen no matter what, because it's the only way you can ever get them clean. And they're vastly pollutant of CO2. In addition, as we now know, there are two successful ferry boats running on hydrogen, one in the Bay Area, which I helped years ago think through, which turned out to be correct. And it turns out it's very economic. It's extremely inexpensive to maintain. And the only problem is it costs too much for the hydrogen, but that's the same price everybody's paying. Number two, you've got the same thing happening in Scandinavia, ferry boat up there. So we can see ferry boats coming. So what we'll call boats with constant proximity to shore clearly are going to go hydrogen because it's cleaner, cheaper, etc. We can talk about ocean-going vessels in a minute. The third thing that you're going to come up with is you're going to say, locomotives. Now, for example, even in electrified Europe, 50% of all the locomotives in Germany are diesel, and there's no plan to change them, except to convert them to hydrogen. Why? because they are on short runs that don't justify electrification of the whole line the way the run between, say, Paris and Munich, or Paris and Brussels, or you pick your favorite long distance high speed rail link.
Yep.
It only works if you've got a whole lot of people going down one particular line, and then you can afford to electrify the line. The vast majority of lines don't have it. So all of the switching diesels, all the short run off track, they're all diesels, and they all have to be replaced. They're terrible pollutants. Well, those diesels are being replaced now by hydrogen locomotives. So there's 28 that have been built. Several of them are in service in Germany and France. We have one in California. They're trying to figure out what to do with it. They've got one in Canada, which we're helping. We have a licensee in Canada who designed the hydrogen distribution system for their locomotive, who's the licensee of our technology. We have licensees in Spain that are doing it now for other reasons, licensees in Germany, et cetera. So we believe, in my model, by the way, for my company, is I don't want to own nothing. I don't want to own a single clipper. I don't want to own a single foot of pipe. I just want to be the technology enabling solution for all of it. Because my theory is, if I can keep giving more and more people licenses, it happens faster. So would it make me more money if I tried to control it? Yeah, probably. That's an old monopolist view of the world. But I don't think I would achieve my objective, which is reverse climate change. So if I can license to 100 people, I don't see that as competition. I see that as my actually seeding the market I want to grow. So that's the next one to go. The one that you want to start focusing on, aircraft. So the really first good hydrogen short-range aircraft has been flying for a couple of months now. A very clever idea. It's not going to go anywhere in its present form, but it's testing. So Zero Avia is testing how those engines can work, and they're testing, et cetera. I think you're going to see not only will companies like mine be making dirigibles for large physical things that have to move. Now, the last one I'm going to touch on is ships at sea. Ships at sea are a phenomenal issue because there's one technology that's being rumored, that no one's seen it work yet, where they think that they can artificially, it's a Israeli technology, where they think they can pack more hydrogen into a kilogram of water than you would normally find in there, with the ratio of 9 or 10 to 1. And what they're using is what's called a catalytic conversion technology. So they're catalyzing the water into a different liquid, filling it full of hydrogen, and then they're reversing the catalysis at the other end.
Interesting.
If that Israeli project turns out to be real, which we won't know for several years now because it's just in the earliest stages of a very small lab prototype. I mean, smaller than your desk is operating right now. But if it works, that could be the way ships at sea could make it. Because the problem with ships at sea today, and why I invented a dirigible, the only ship that ever tried to move hydrogen any distance was the Frontier Suizo. So if you haven't read about it, you should. And they wanted to move a cargo of hydrogen from Australia, where unfortunately it was being made from coal, black hydrogen, and they wanted to make it go to Kyoto, Japan. So they loaded this ship up with a cryogenic liquid hydrogen for what was to be a 16-day voyage, which was. It was 1 day loading, 16 days, 1 day offloading, okay? By the time they got to their port, they'd lost 37% of their cargo, meaning they couldn't keep it cold enough. Why? Because hydrogen is the coldest thing known on Earth, right? So liquid hydrogen is minus 453 degrees Fahrenheit, which means it's the coldest thing on Earth. It's very close to absolute zero. So even when liquid hydrogen is being held in a specially designed tank that keeps it cryogenic, touching the wall of the tank is warmer than 453 degrees. Okay, so what happens is it starts to what's called off gas. And if you don't want to blow yourself up with pressure, not through a bomb, pressure, you have to vent that. You can't keep it contained because when hydrogen starts to expand, it starts to expand. You've seen weather balloons, for example. They start out little, like this big, and the next thing, another 100 feet across, and they get up to 100,000 feet.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that expansion capability cannot be restrained. So if you don't have a way to deal with that, you cannot possibly move it by ship at sea economically. And we can talk about it at length, but it doesn't make any sense. So the way to move hydrogen, in conclusion, is cryogenically over long distance. I'd say 500 miles or more makes economic sense. It's cheaper than a pipeline. And under 500 miles, use a 100% leak-proof hydrogen pipe, which are capable of being deployed right now. We have a technology to do it. We assume other companies will too in time. And you want leak-proof hydrogen going through pipes at very high pressure. I'll give you this last part. So we have been helpful to the Germans in designing the hydrogen conversion with what's called the German backbone network. So in that backbone network, they got all these methane pipes, and then they got big gaps. And then they have more methane pipes, and they got gaps. And what they want to do is tie all the gaps in the methane pipes together and turn it into a hydrogen pipe. The number of problems they will run into is legendary. I won't go into all. But one of the key ones is none of the pipes in Europe is designed to operate at higher than what's called 50 baud. 50 baud is very low pressure. So if I were to run hydrogen, even if I could, and you can't because it's not going to work the way they want to do it, at 50 baud, I'd go broke. Because 50 baud of hydrogen has half the economic value as 50 baud of methane. Got it?
Yep.
So the pipes that we designed, that we now have licensed people to build, carry 170 baud, more than 3-to-1. So you actually will make more money carrying the hydrogen, and you don't have to worry about blowing the pipe out, because if you use the pipe by itself, it'll blow out at 50. So we had to come up with a way to create what we call a pipe within a pipe technology. So all the pressure is contained in the inner pipe. The outer pipe has 50 baud or less. Actually, it has ambient. So those are some examples of where you're going to see hydrogen and how you're going to see it deployed. There's no way that batteries are going to drive 18-wheel trucks, and everybody knows that now. There's no secret on that. And there's no way that batteries can drive locomotives. And there's no way you're going to continue to have be diesel. So all of those are like have-tos. But the other ones that I mentioned, ships particularly, ferry boats, coastal craft, just a matter of time.
Yeah. And so, Rinaldo, you mentioned earlier that like the job of a business and a corporation is to change and adapt. How have you found in your experience, because we're dealing with commercial industrial customers all the time, working with them to deploy on-site energy systems, how do you get them to, one, make these leaps and embrace new technology, and two, balance those like short-term financial reporting metrics with the long-term operational value of doing the right thing and investing in a smart return on investment way?
Yeah. My mother was not a very well-educated woman. She had a lot of what I call peasant wisdom. One of her favorites was, you catch more flies with a spoonful of honey than a barrel full of vinegar. Well, my comment always to business is, let me show you the win here.
Yeah, nice.
Let me show you the win. I'm not here to get you to do something that's not in your interest. I'll come back to that in a second. But in that process, the biggest issue right now blocking corporations from adopting prudent, better economic policies that are more economically sustainable and more environmentally sustainable is basically politics. Okay, so it is the fear that has been struck is working. Gutting the EPA is working. The idea that no one wants to look like Trump's coming after them. And we live in a time of an autocracy where people are afraid of the fearless leader. And so they're pulling in their horns and they're going, okay, well, let's cancel these plans. Maybe equality is not a good thing. Maybe fossil fuels are a great thing. Why give them up? And I could go on. And of course, it belies any kind of logic, because we know the biosphere is in terrible disrepair right now and rapidly becoming unlivable. And if you don't think that's true, just go look at what just happened in the last 3 weeks. Where are you guys now living? Where are you coming from?
We're San Diego area, Southern California.
You're in Southern Cal?
Both just south of you. I'm in Orange County. Okay,
so we've escaped the heat dome.
Yep.
We've escaped torrential flooding that was spontaneous. Of course, we all know that the atmosphere is holding about 10% more moisture now than it was even a decade ago. And when that moisture goes up because of evaporation, it's got to come down. And when it comes down fast and you get flash floods. Have we seen our last flash flood? Oh, no. Have we seen our last heat dome? Oh, no. Have we seen the last person die for lack of air conditioning in Paris and Rome and London? Oh, no. Okay, so these are all, and by the way, the demands on our electrical system are going to get more and more amplified constantly. And if we get a chance, we should come back to how to fix the electrical system, because it ain't going anywhere but further broken than the way it's currently being run. So my point of all this is, when you look at what business will do out of its own self-interest, will be the right solution over time, as it was just 3 years ago. And I don't even think it's going to take huge subsidies to make that happen, but it is going to take removing the objective brakes that are on the system right now, all the ways that the administration is trying to kill renewable energy. I'll give you an example. California, we're both all in California. So there is no excuse for the fact that, California is doing terrible with solar right now. 2/3 of the solar installers now unemployed. What are the reasons? Because the electrical company, which controls the government, has convinced them that we should all be taxed once we put solar on a roof. I put mine on 10 years ago, and now I'm going to have to pay a tax for it. Why? Under the theory that it's needed to pay for the grid. Why do I need to pay for a grid that can't possibly survive? It's already falling down. It's collapsing. Clearly, there's no future for the grid in my future. And by the way, a couple of good papers on that I could give you. The former head of CAISO, which is the grid operator, the guy who was in charge of long distance planning was a guy named Christoph. And Dr. Christoph, ultimately, because of the story I'm going to tell you, became a good friend of mine. And he put out a paper where he said the future of the grid is no grid. What we need to do is have a honeycomb of microgrids, producing energy where it's needed and not moving it around unless we have to. And if you do, you port it from an adjacent grid. So if you picture a honeycomb, you can get energy from anywhere to anywhere. And of course, that's what happened in San Diego. You're in San Diego. That's what happened in San Diego. Huge fire. Grid was about to go down. They called UCSD, that has a microgrid, and said, can you give us emergency porting of power?
Yep.
The guy said, the most I can give you is 7 megawatts. They go, that'll do it. We shot the 7 megawatts. The grid never went down in San Diego. And that's what's going to happen everywhere. And if you want, I can tell you what happens when you have a discontinuous grid. But so I they wrote this paper, Lorenzo Christoph, and a professor buddy of his at the time at Caltech. And I read it, and I said, it's a very technical paper. And I said, wow, in there's this footnote. What do you do if you don't have another grid around you to port power? Like, what if you're in the middle of, the Inland Valley, Tulare or some damn thing? Well, it turns out, I said, if you were to put a fuel cell assisted microgrid in there, then you're never more than 20 minutes away from a source of hydrogen. So I told them about it. They asked me to write it up. I did. I ran it by the leading hydrogen expert in California, Dr. Samuelson. We published this paper, which I'll send you the 2 papers. So there's the paper about we've solved every problem except how do you port from a non-contiguous one. And then there's my paper that says, here's how you do it. And the two fit together like a hand in glove. And I was just recently asked by a candidate for governor if I believed that was practical. And I said, it's not only practical, it's inevitable, because you can't maintain the grid. First of all, more electric cars, forget it. We're already getting power cutoffs 12 times a year. Forget it. We're going to put more demand for server farms and you name it on the grid. Forget about it. In fact, our organization, the Academy, is the only organization that successfully closed the last 2 peaker plants in California that were fossil fuel fired. One of them in Oxnard and one of them in Santa Barbara. Why I share that with you is because if you look at it rationally, no one would do peaker plants. First of all, what's green about a peaker plant that burns methane? Hello, you don't get to green by burning methane. I don't care what else you do. So we believe at the Academy, we love providing solutions. We'll do it for free for people, for businesses, but they're going to have to overcome their fear of government right now. And right now, it's really got people locked up.
Yep. What you just shared very, very much resonated. I think we're starting to see more and more businesses understand the realities of the grid, but largely I'd say just due to all the hype around AI and data centers and all the load, that it's finally kind of coming to light in a more broader business community. But no, I think that you're dead on, and I completely agree on your sentiment there around the centralized grid and the need for a more distributed grid.
Here's a statistic for you. Not one server farm for AI or for mining Bitcoin has been built in the last 5 years that doesn't use hydrogen. And the reason is they have to have continuous power, has to be uninterrupted, no noise, perfectly resilient. The only way to get that is a fuel cell fed by hydrogen. No other way.
Yeah.
So they all now have specified that. So they won't be pulling from the grid as much as they used to, although their offices pull from the grid and everything else. But we are becoming an electrical society.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love to say to people is stop looking at whether it's molecules, hydrogen, or electrons, electricity. It's both. And it's bringing them together in tandem.
We're starting to come up on time, and it was a nice segue. I was going to shift to our power surge round because I feel like I know the answer, but at the same time, you've shared some interesting insights, and I may not know the answer. So if we shift to the power surge round, if you could be any one energy technology, Rinaldo, what would it be and why?
Well, it would be hydrogen, of course, and it would be hydrogen in conjunction with fuel cells, most likely. Because that's what runs trains, that's what runs boats, that's what runs cars, that's what runs 18-wheelers. So that's the solution. And it's not that complicated. It's actually quite simple. Fuel cell assisted by hydrogen microgrids. Think about this. If we located one at the base of every existing substation in California, there's 3,300 of them, we could start feeding electricity from the microgrid into the local distribution lines. Now, Edison gets to keep all the control of local distribution, which they'd love. I'd give SoCal Gas the right to bring the hydrogen to the substation, but the substation stays in business. And over time, you don't have a grid anymore. You don't need it. It's gone. And in the meantime, you take the load off. So if something starts to, we need a power cutoff. Okay, no problem. We'll just keep funneling power from our grid, i.e. microgrid, down the line. So, and that's doable today. You can build a microgrid in 6 months.
Yeah, we are firm believers. We are microgrid experts and on-site energy believers. And I think the utilities of the future become tolling agents versus grid managers and operators. And I think you're spot on. I think the distribution system is where it's at. For people who want to learn more about either hydrogen or this sort of no-grid future, where do you get your knowledge or content that you can recommend people check out?
Yeah, first of all, so we publish an Academy newsletter every month. And I produce at least 1 or 2 articles or 1 or 2 interviews a month on these subjects. So and they're all topical, they're fresh. And I would recommend people take a free newsletter from us. By the way, we also do a free newsletter called the Optimist Daily, because I decided people needed some good news. And it's free. I urge you to take it. It's like a story a day comes into your inbox with something good happening somewhere in the world you had no idea was happening. And you go, oh, there's some bright light there. It gets me going. Like the first thing I open is I feel better about what comes next.
That's great. And that can be found at worldbusiness.org, correct?
Yeah. Optimist Daily is the name of that publication. And our newsletter is worldbusiness.org. And please write in and just tell them you'd like to get on the free distribution list. If someone's really into it, guys, and they really want to know, like a researcher, we have a publication I do every week for serious scientific people where we collect every hydrogen article in the world, well, more than hydrogen, and we publish it to a select group of our scientists and fellows. And so if somebody really wanted to get in deep, I'd turn them on to that. But that's not for the public.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. All right, let's bring us home. I've got one last question. Generally say personally or professionally, but I feel like yours is all one. If you were to finish this statement, in my life, I will have been successful when?
It's clear people have begun to adopt survivable strategies.
Nice.
Amen.
And then I don't have to. Then I get to go home and have a good time. I get to relax. But I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow, unfortunately.
No. But lovely way to end. And thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your commitment and your mission.
Rinaldo.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for doing what you're doing.
Time. Yes, appreciate it.
Gareth, absolutely loved Rinaldo's energy and passion for leveraging business to do good things. It's always been something that's been a driving force for me, and I think he's had quite a life and experienced all kinds of things. So it's great that he's chosen to apply himself to bettering the world and do so in a lot of very interesting ways. I think really for me, what stood out, his commentary around the future of the grid. I really liked the conversation we had there at the end, and his analogy to a honeycomb, and how you can interconnect all these microgrids, or maybe it's not even microgrids, it can be distributed energy infrastructure, but really kind of burgeoning this future of prosumers and individuals or businesses being able to transact with one another, and the grid really just becoming a facilitator versus this monopoly And we're seeing it elsewhere. I mean, we're seeing it with digital currencies and blockchain, and the decentralization is something that allows more resilience and lower costs, and not this whole monopolistic money mongering that might be happening, and what we're seeing with our investor-owned utilities and all the challenges that we see. So I think that's really one of the things that stood out for me. How about yourself?
No, well, just building on that point, Dan, I think it's super interesting times, isn't it? Because you can get political quite quickly. But I think the reality is, based on the trends and the decisions that are being made, we're seeing an erosion in leadership in general, and a lack of trust. And what all of that leads to is people wanting to have more control and more security. And I think you're right in terms of, we've just seen a few new crypto bills pass through, and stable coins are going to become almost the trading currency of the future, backed by dollars. And it's going to really disrupt the whole banking industry. The way we've transferred money has not changed in our lifetimes, and it's slow and it's expensive. And that's why that market is now going to take off now that there's some clarity around it. And it also then unlocks a whole new realm of opportunities for how do we transact energy at scale, and how do we do it in a really lean, efficient, and purposeful way. And I do love the honeycomb concept, because, for a long time, always thought about like that self-healing, interconnected web of distributed energy assets all working in tandem in a really scalable, flexible, agile way. And I think we're seeing it working in California right now. I don't know whether you saw the latest post today from Mark about the solar and wind and water penetration. And he's saying, actually, while energy demand is going through the roof with data centers and EVs, actually our consumption has stayed stable because of the amount of behind the meter systems that are being deployed. And I think this is the interesting trade-off, isn't it? Is like, do you actually need the grid in the future, or does everyone create their own power? And so I really enjoyed that. And I love the commentary about how do we get businesses to act. And it's with a spoonful of honey versus a barrel of vinegar. And how do we create more stakeholder capital in all senses of the word capital, not just profits, but profits with purpose, and really impacting all stakeholders, not just shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers. It's awesome.
In internalizing many of the externalities that have maybe been a plague of this businesses in the pursuit of purely shareholder value versus stakeholder value, and I think we're seeing more of society demand this, and I thought it was super interesting. He was sharing with us afterwards of actually seeing it bear fruit in the public markets, and how companies that adopt this end up outperforming the broader market. And so this is only going to really amplify in the coming years.
And I think hydrogen and fuel cells are going to role to play. And if it takes floating airships, I'm all for it. Big vision.
Absolutely. Especially for the hard-to-abate industries. Yep. And I love that we still have folks tackling it. So no, it was a great conversation, and excited to pick up with him here in the near future on some of these concepts.
Yeah. Appreciate you.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at VECKTA.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the VECKTA team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.